There are certain symbols that make people feel a chill down their spine the moment they hear the name. Samurai are one of them. In many people's imagination, samurai are warriors who move like living blades, silent, restrained, steady.
They speak little.
They do not tremble. Their eyes remain calm, whether facing danger or temptation. But what truly makes samurai worthy of respect does not lie in the sword itself. It lies in the mind behind it. A kind of inner steel, forged through repetition, solitude, sweat, silence, and the constant choice to do what is right, even when that choice comes at a cost. That is why when we talk about the hardship of samurai training, we should not understand it simply as enduring pain or punishing the body to prove toughness. Hardship, in the spirit of Bushido, was a method of cultivation. It was a way of forcing oneself to pass through laziness, fear, and anger, until one could finally govern oneself. The person who wins a battle is not necessarily stronger, but the person who conquers himself is far more difficult to defeat. This video traces the forms of mental discipline idealized in the image of the samurai. Discipline in daily life, mental stillness to keep the mind clear, endurance to build inner strength, morality and honor as an internal compass, and finally, the attitude toward life and death, learning to live upright, deeply, and without being ruled by fear. For samurai, hardship did not begin on the battlefield. It began in everyday life, the place where people are most likely to become careless and indulgent. They believed that before defeating others, one must defeat oneself. And the clearest way to struggle with oneself was through discipline in daily living. Waking up early was not merely about having more time. It was a declaration made to oneself. I control today. I do not allow today to drag me along. A regulated rhythm of life, clear schedules, consistent training, steady habits created a feeling of firmness, like driving posts deep into the ground. When the foundation is stable, the mind sways less. Alongside discipline of time came the discipline of desire. In the idealized image, samurai did not chase pleasures that softened the will. They ate simply and restrained indulgence, not because they despised comfort, but because they understood a crucial truth. The more a person depends on comfort, the weaker he becomes in the face of adversity. By learning to say enough to desire, samurai gradually developed a quiet form of strength, one that did not need to be displayed, yet was difficult to corrupt and difficult to shake. Another essential element was labor and self-reliance. Samurai trained themselves by serving themselves. From the smallest tasks, organizing their belongings, caring for their weapons, taking responsibility for their way of life, they learned not to rely on others and not to shift blame. This chain of self-responsibility created a particular kind of freedom. Freedom from laziness, freedom from dependence, freedom from the mindset of waiting for someone else to intervene. In other words, hardship in daily life was not meant to punish the self. It was meant to build a moral spine, to live upright, self-directed, and faithful to one's own word. That is why, in the samurai spirit, small daily difficulties became the most reliable forge. Each time one wakes a little earlier, indulges a little less, or takes responsibility for one more small task, another hammer strike lands on the will. When a real crisis arrives, inner strength does not suddenly appear. It has been accumulating quietly through countless ordinary days. If hardship in daily life was the foundation, then training the mind through the body was the true furnace. In the idealized image, samurai did not learn martial arts through excitement or impulsive enthusiasm. They trained with a steadiness so strict it bordered on severity. Techniques and kata were repeated again and again in silence, not because of a lack of creativity, but because they believed correct repetition would wear down the ego and impatience, leaving only precision. When movement becomes carved into the body, the mind grows quieter. And in that quiet, the practitioner begins to hear the breath, the heartbeat, and the subtle fluctuations of the mind. But the distinctive feature of samurai training lies here. They did not train only when they felt strong. They trained in fatigue. When the hands began to tremble, the legs felt heavy, the breath shortened, and the thought of quitting crept in like cold mist. That was when the real battle began. No longer a struggle with the exercise, but a struggle with the inner breaking point. Pushing through those final moments did not immediately make them superior, but it made them difficult to break. Because on the battlefield and in real crises, the body never gets to choose favorable conditions. Character is decided in disadvantage. Throughout this process, samurai placed great importance on posture and breathing. Stable posture allowed force to travel correctly. Even breathing kept the mind from panicking. When the practitioner learned where to relax, where to engage, and how to breathe under pressure, the body gradually became an anchor for the mind. When the body is stable, the mind is stable. In moments of chaos, samurai did not argue with emotion using words. They returned themselves to order through breath and stance. And so, the deeper meaning of physical training was never simply to become stronger or faster. It was a way of building mental discipline through bodily discipline, the most direct and practical gateway available. That is why, in the idealized samurai mindset, a sword strike is only truly sharp when the person wielding it does not waver, when the hands remain precise in exhaustion, when the eyes stay clear under pressure, and when the cut does not arise from anger, but from clarity refined through thousands of repetitions. Alongside discipline and physical training, the idealized image of the samurai is also tied to a subtler form of strength, inner stillness shaped by Zen. They understood a cold truth. The most dangerous enemy does not always stand in front of you. Often it lives inside the mind. Fear, anger, thoughts tangled like threads, making the hands shake and decisions drift off course. For this reason, mental stillness was not a refined hobby. It was a way of sharpening the mind so it would not be dragged around by inner turbulence. In practice, samurai meditation began very simply. Seated meditation, breathing, stillness, sitting upright, breathing evenly, observing, not trying to suppress thoughts, not chasing after them, simply watching them pass, like clouds drifting across a mountain. Through this repeated return to the breath, the practitioner slowly realized something essential. Thoughts are not commands. Fear may arise, but action does not have to follow fear. Anger may flare, but the sword does not have to move with it. From this realization, distance appears. A small gap, but enough to allow choice. The state samurai aimed for was often called mushin, no mind. It sounds like emptiness, but it is not. It is a mind that is not stuck, not clinging to anxiety, not trapped by wrath, not driven by agitation. When the mind is no mind, action becomes clear, not because nothing is felt, but because action is no longer a reflex. It is a response to the situation as it truly is. Mushin is like the surface of still water, not because there is no wind, but because the practitioner no longer allows the wind to muddy the surface. Alongside Mushin is Zanshin, remaining mind. Many people relax too early after finishing a task. They assume safety and become careless. Zanshin reminds the warrior that finished does not always mean safe. After a strike, awareness remains. The eyes stay bright. The ears remain open. The mind does not scatter. This is not tension. It is soft vigilance, like a door that has been closed, but not locked. Always ready for change. Together, Mushin and Zanshin train samurai to remain calm inside chaos. When the inside is quiet, the noise outside loses its power to pull the person apart. And in the idealized image of the samurai, it was precisely this inner silence that allowed them to notice what others missed. The opponent's breathing, the instability of a situation, the small signs that precede disruption. Zen did not make samurai soft. It made them sharp. Sharp in observation, sharp in decision-making. and sharp in the ability to keep emotions from seizing control. In this idealized image, one thing is almost certain. Samurai did not wait for life to become strong. On the contrary, they deliberately stepped into hardship as if entering a forge, because they believed that willpower only reveals itself when both body and mind are tested. For this reason, endurance training was often placed under conditions that were harsh but controlled. Cold, heat, hunger, fatigue. Not to display pain tolerance, but to become familiar with discomfort, so that when it appeared unexpectedly, the mind would not immediately panic. Having already experienced shivering cold, burning heat, gnawing hunger, and heavy fatigue, the warrior learned a crucial lesson. Discomfort does not destroy you. It demands that you become more aware. Alongside this came tests of persistence. Long marches, extended training sessions, steady labor maintained over time. Samurai understood that in many situations, victory does not belong to the one who explodes with force, but to the one who does not break. Endurance creates a quiet kind of strength. Not dramatic, not loud. It accumulates like flowing water wearing down stone. Long days of training taught them how to distribute energy, regulate breathing, and keep the mind clear, even while the body cried out. And it was precisely this ability that allowed them to remain standing in the long battles of life. From these experiences, Fudoshin, the immovable mind, gradually took shape. An immovable mind does not mean numbness. It does not mean becoming hard like wood. It means preserving one's character as pressure increases. Pressed, but not cowardly. Provoked, but not chaotic. Driven to the edge, but not losing what is right. When fear surged, samurai did not deny it. They stood with it. They breathed with it. And they still did what needed to be done. When crisis arrived, a person with Fudoshin was not calm because he felt nothing. He was calm because he knew exactly where he stood and what must be done. This is the deeper meaning of endurance training. To gradually raise the threshold at which the mind collapses. Hardship was used like a vaccination. A small dose endured repeatedly so that the system would adapt. The body and mind learned to function without being constantly comforted. In the idealized samurai spirit, hardship was never about harming the body. It was about forging something more valuable. A mind that does not surrender. When the body is exhausted, but the mind remains clear. When circumstances are harsh, but character stays intact. That is steel tempered by fire. If cold, hunger, fatigue, and hardship forged endurance, then moral cultivation and honor represented the deepest form of samurai austerity, the austerity of character. In the idealized image of the samurai, a warrior was never allowed to be strong only in the physical sense. Strength without self-restraint was considered dangerous. For that reason, a core set of values functioned as the samurai's spiritual backbone. Integrity, so one would not bend for advantage. Courage, to do what is right, even when it is costly. Compassion, so strength would not turn into cruelty. Respect, to recognize the dignity of others. Honesty, so words carried weight. Honor, so one would not degrade oneself. And loyalty, to remain faithful to one's chosen duty. What matters is that these values were not slogans. They were forged through small, often tedious acts. Keeping one's word, being punctual, finishing what one starts, admitting fault when wrong, refusing to shift blame when failing. These were quiet moral exercises, because making excuses is easy. Blaming others is easy. Speaking well is easy. Maintaining standards when no one is watching, that is difficult. The idealized samurai accepted this difficulty as a form of training. Each time they refused to indulge laziness, distort the truth, or hide behind justification, their character was sharpened. To prevent discipline from eroding over time, daily self-reflection was essential. Not self-punishment, but polishing, like wiping dust from a mirror. Where was I impatient today? Where did I break a promise?
Where did I avoid responsibility?
Correcting even one small fault per day, consistently, eventually formed great virtue. This kind of training may sound ordinary, but precisely because it is ordinary, it endures. Character is not forged in heroic moments. It accumulates through hundreds of quiet choices to do what is right in small matters. That is why, in the idealized samurai spirit, the most powerful sword was not steel, but trust.
A samurai was not only respected for strength,
He was trusted, and that is the highest form of austerity. Not enduring pain on the skin,
but enduring the effort of maintaining standards within, day after day, until honor becomes instinct.
Among the layers of samurai mental training, there is one final layer, cold and clear, facing death. This may sound dark, but within Bushido, remembering death was not about pessimism. It was about living upright and living deeply. When a person dares to look directly at the final limit of life, small things lose their power. Fear loosens its grip. Hesitation fades. In this idealized spirit, remembering death had three clear effects: less fear, less greed, and less hesitation. Less fear, because everyone reaches the same end, so there is no reason to tremble before judgment or temporary failure. Less greed, because wealth, status, and victory are seen as fragile, while character and promises are worth preserving. Less hesitation, because when time is not infinite, one cannot remain forever at the crossroads.
what is right must be done. What must be said must be spoken.
What must be released must be released. From this, the mind becomes sharp, like a blade stripped of excess weight. Facing death was also a form of preparation. The idealized samurai trained themselves to accept impermanence. Everything can change in an instant. Victory can become defeat.
Meetings can become farewells.
By absorbing this truth, they stopped clinging to the illusion that everything will always be fine. Instead, they focused on what could be done now. Train properly, act correctly, and preserve honor. Accepting impermanence did not weaken them. It made them realistic, alert, and less shocked when disruption arrived. The deepest meaning here is inner freedom. Most people are bound by invisible ropes. Fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of being judged, fear of being wrong. When one learns to face death without denial or romanticization, those ropes begin to loosen. Fear still exists, but no longer rules. Life is still cherished, but not at the cost of integrity. From this emerges a rare calmness, not coldness, but dignity. When death is no longer a shadow pressing from behind, action becomes clear. Decisions grow firmer. Courage becomes quieter. Each choice carries weight. One does not need to stand at the edge of death to learn this. Simply remembering that life is finite naturally encourages one to live more attentively, more honestly, and with less fear-driven drift. Looking back at the layers of samurai cultivation, daily discipline, physical training, mental stillness, endurance, honor, and acceptance of impermanence, we can see one unifying thread. The most valuable hardship is not external severity, but self-mastery.
In modern life, this spirit can be distilled safely and realistically.
No armor.
No swords, only clear pillars. Discipline to resist harmful habits. Mental stillness to avoid being dragged by anxiety or impulse. Physical care, so a stable body supports a stable mind. And above all, keeping one's word to others and to oneself. A person who is reliable in small matters is often resilient in great ones. However, drawing inspiration from samurai discipline does not mean pursuing extremism. Modern austerity is not about self-harm, exhaustion, or turning life into punishment. True discipline should serve health and character, making us stronger, clearer, and more resilient, not broken or bitter. If a practice leads to injury, collapse, imbalance, or cruelty toward oneself or others, it is no longer cultivation. It is misdirection.
The ideal samurai spirit aimed for steadiness and integrity, not worship of pain.
The most effective approach is to begin small, but remain consistent.
20 to 30 minutes a day, kept like a promise. 10 minutes of mental stillness.
10 to 15 minutes of physical movement. 2 or 3 minutes of self-reflection. The point is not intensity to impress, but consistency to endure. Because resilience does not come from one explosive day. It grows from hundreds of quiet days. This is how the samurai spirit can continue to live in the modern world. Not as distant legend,
But as a method for cultivating steadiness, integrity, and inner strength.
in conclusion, idealized samurai training was never a pursuit of fearsome image or glorious victory. It was a journey of conquering oneself, overcoming laziness, fear, anger, and the temptations that cause people to drift.
The true strength of the samurai was never in the blade,
But in the ability to keep the mind steady, the character upright, and action clear when conditions became harsh. Seen this way, samurai austerity forms a complete system. Discipline in daily life to build the foundation. Physical training to strengthen will. Mental stillness to master impulses.
endurance to withstand adversity.
Moral cultivation and honor to become trustworthy. And finally, facing impermanence and death to live decisively, free from fear. Each element points toward a single goal, creating a person who can remain standing in the storm without losing himself. And the final message, perhaps the most important to carry forward, is this. The most enduring strength is not explosive power, but discipline and calm. When one maintains a steady rhythm of life, a clear mind, and faith in what is right, there is no need to become a samurai to live like one. Steadfast, honorable, and unshaken in the face of whatever comes.